primary
Yeah.
school children telling us that
Yes.
they're vaping,
Yes.
because they think that there's nothing wrong with it.
Yes.
And it makes them feel good, and they're
Yes.
stressed out, and it makes them feel
Wow.
better.
Wow.
So we really have a lot
Mm-hmm.
of work to do,
Yes.
not only in terms of awareness building, but also on the regulatory side of things
Yes.
and the
Important.
enforcement side of things, because people
Important.
are not supposed to be selling, whether
Yes.
it be alcohol or cannabis or cannabis products
Yes.
or vape products. These are not to be sold
Mm.
to children under 18.
Yes.
It's you're potentially
Mm-hmm.
damaging those
Mm-hmm.
children.
And I think okay, very good points that you raise, because one of the things that needs to also be considered, just as when children who are sexually molested by whoever it is, and that is becomes a reportable offense, when it is
Yes.
that a child comes and says that, boy, my brother, my big brother helping me to vape or give me something to vape. That should be a reportable offense too. And that I think you're right, the regulatory part that allows our children the free access, because if you don't have any regulation, then it's going to be free access and there are no consequences to what is happening. And that is what is happening to a lot of our children, the free access. And I was
Yes.
mentioning that too because we are so online, social media, and everything just looks so nice and good.
Yes.
And my
Yes.
favorite artist is doing this, and my friend over
Yes.
there that I met
Yes.
online is doing this.
Yes.
Then it becomes so
Last year,
nice.
yes, last year we did some focus groups. We did 10 focus groups across the island. No, not 10, 13 focus groups. We did 13 focus groups in 13 parishes among 160 students between ages 13 to 17.
Mm-hmm,
And I can tell you, and we also interviewed guidance counselors. We
mm-hmm,
wanted to find out, what were the major things that were
mm-hmm,
impacting our young people? What's
mm-hmm,
going on with drug use? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? How are they managing? Particularly after they returned to school after the COVID impact. And I have to tell you that it was extremely enlightening
mm-hmm,
and concerning to hear our young people speak about the kind of exposure and the
mm-hmm.
kind of things that they are
Wow.
engaging in because of the
Mm-hmm.
level of
Yes.
stress that they are
Wow.
facing and because of the
Wow.
difficulties and because
Wow.
of their inability to cope.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Also,
mm-hmm.
because of their inability to open up and speak to other persons about the
Mm-hmm.
struggles that they were having. So they
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel like they could trust
Yes.
adults, that they
Mm-hmm.
could trust their parents, that they could
Mm-hmm.
trust teachers, guidance counselors. So they are in a space, a very difficult space
Mm-hmm.
where, because of their thought patterns and I mean, this is not generalizable to all of our young people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Hello. I think we lost Mrs. Atkins again, and she's going to be speaking to herself again for a while. But we want to welcome our viewers on Facebook, YouTube as well. We are back online, and we are so happy that you're able to join us. We know you joined late, but we are having a wonderful conversation and a very much needed conversation because we're actually looking at the adolescents on and their use of substances. And the National Council on Drug Abuse has been doing quite a good job in doing these surveys to bring to us to understand what our children are saying and what they are doing, so that we can be able to help them, and to help them to be able to empower them to be able to make wise decisions. So we are back with Mrs. Atkinson. You're back with
Yes,
us. I'm so sorry. I hope
yes.
you weren't talking to yourself for a very long time.
No, I stopped. I stopped this time. Once bitten, twice shy. So what
Yes.
I was explaining is, even though, because these were focus groups, we can't say that all of our young
Yes.
people
Right.
across the island feel
Right.
this way.
Right.
So we
Right.
want to
Right.
make that very clear.
Right.
But what was apparent is that, our young people are struggling, and you would be amazed by
Mm-hmm.
the number of things that
Mm-hmm.
they will disclose
Mm-hmm.
when they're
Mm-hmm.
in a comfortable space,
Right.
comfortable enough to
Mm-hmm.
speak freely about how they feel and
Yes.
what they're doing and what they're
Yes.
engaging in and what they're seeing and what their
Mm-hmm.
friends are doing.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where we also picked up on the fact that new substances are in our midst. And when I
Right.
say new, I
Mm-hmm.
mean relatively new. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
speaking specifically about MDMA,
Mm-hmm.
which is otherwise called ecstasy and
Mm-hmm.
otherwise called
Molly.
Molly. When
Mm-hmm.
we ask them about the popular drugs that are now being used by
Mm-hmm.
youth,
Mm-hmm.
back in the days, I mean, because we do focus
Mm-hmm.
groups on a regular basis. Back in the
Yes.
day, they would
Yes.
say alcohol, they would say,
Yes.
ganja, they
Ganja.
would say
Mm-hmm.
edibles, they would
Mm-hmm.
say cigarettes. And
Mm-hmm.
no, they are
Mm-hmm.
saying Molly, they are
Mm-hmm.
saying edibles, and
Mm-hmm.
they're saying vape. Those were the three main things
Yes.
that they spoke
Oh.
about.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you know what it underscores is that
Mm-hmm.
the landscape
Mm-hmm.
of substances and substance use is
Mm-hmm.
changing
Mm-hmm.
in our society.
What about the
And
mixtures? Because I hear a lot of them with the cough syrup and the
right,
mixtures. That's
that
all
last
now.
year when we spoke to them, they didn't speak about that as much as
Interesting.
maybe about 2 years ago.
Yes.
But they're still
Okay.
doing it. There are still young
Yes.
people who are using what they call lean,
Lean.
where they
Yes.
use prescription strength cough medicine and they
Mm-hmm.
mix that with soda and sweetie
Mm-hmm.
and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not something that is. This is something that's adopted from a North American practice,
Yes. Yes.
and it is something that adolescents across the Caribbean had started
Mm-hmm.
doing maybe about two
Yes.
or three, maybe 4 years
Years
ago.
ago. Mm-hmm.
But right now,
Mm-hmm.
they're talking about Molly, they're talking about
Yes.
vaping, they're talking about
Yes.
edibles.
And I think
And
and
what
I'm
we've
sorry,
tried to
okay. I think one
go
of the
ahead.
things that I don't think a lot of persons realize that some of these vape machines are so cute that persons don't recognize that they are vape machines at all. Like pens
Absolutely.
and looking like pens and
Yes, yes. We
very
call them
interesting.
first generation and second generation
Yes,
and
sir.
third generation
Father.
vape devices.
Whoa, whoa.
Because initially, when
Yeah.
they came out, they looked just like a cigarette,
Yes,
right? But it
yes,
was an
yes.
electronic form.
Yes, yes.
And then they started looking like some little, it has advanced over time. And right
Yes,
now, it
yes.
can be anything. It can be
Anything.
a jump drive, it can be
Yes,
a
yes,
perfume bottle,
yes.
it can be. And so, one of the things that they tell us to is that it's easy to mask it because teacher
Mm-hmm.
don't know,
Yes,
parents don't know,
yes.
nobody
Oh
knows
my
that this is
gosh.
this thing here
Yes,
that they have in
yes.
their hand is
Mm-hmm.
actually something that they're using
Mm-hmm.
to vape. And so
Mm-hmm.
we've had to also do a number of capacity building sessions with
Mm-hmm.
teachers,
Mm-hmm.
for them to understand. I'm sorry for the noise in the background. For
Okay.
them to understand, the changes that are
Yes,
taking place,
yes, yes,
especially with vaping. Some of
yes.
our young people are even vaping in class because, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
scent of it is not
Mm-hmm.
like the combustible cigarette,
Mm-hmm.
where when somebody's smoking around you, you
Yes,
know
yes,
right
no,
away.
yes, yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
So they're able to mask it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's we really are in a space
Oh my
where
gosh.
we have to
Yes.
continuously be
Mm-hmm.
providing
Mm-hmm.
not only public education messaging,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
not only knowledge kind of sharing
Yes.
exercises,
Yes.
but also to be able to provide our young people and young adults with the skills to
Yes.
cope with the issues that they're
Yes.
facing.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's not only to say, if you use
Yes.
alcohol, alcohol is
Yes.
this, and
Yes.
alcohol
Yes.
and ganja is that, and
Yes.
this is the kind of
Yes.
drug, and this is the
Yes.
impact. But we have to help them
Mm-hmm.
to make decisions and
Mm-hmm.
wise
Mm-hmm.
decisions. Help
Mm-hmm.
them to
Mm-hmm.
cope with the stressors that
Mm-hmm.
they're facing. In a
Mm-hmm.
focus group that we were conducting
Mm-hmm.
recently, a young lady, she started to cry and she was
Wow.
crying and crying,
Wow.
and we had to stay back and ask, what is the issue,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what is your challenge?
Mm-hmm.
And she disclosed that she's cutting herself, she's
Mm-hmm.
vaping, she's doing
Mm-hmm.
all of these things
Mm-hmm.
because there are family related issues that she's
Mm.
unable to cope with, and she
Wow.
has nobody who she can talk
Talk
to.
to. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that is the experience of several young
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, mental health issues also need to be
Yes.
addressed.
Yes.
When we this interviewed
Mm-hmm.
guidance counselors spoke about the fact that they had never before seen or heard young
Mm-hmm.
people speak so much about suicide as they
Mm.
are hearing it
No.
now, or
Mm-hmm.
seeing themselves
Mm-hmm.
harming
Mm-hmm.
as they are seeing it now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if
Yeah,
we
and perhaps you
fully
can think back.
appreciate.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
you probably can think back to when you were in school as well.
Right. I mean, when I was in school, and I was born in the 70s,
Well,
mid
we won't date
70s.
ourselves today.
All right, let's not do that. All right, no worries. Moving right along. But when I was in school, one
Yeah.
person committed suicide, or
Mm-hmm.
as I say now,
Mm-hmm.
death by suicide. That's
Mm-hmm.
the politically correct
Mm-hmm.
thing to say now.
Mm-hmm.
And it was mind-boggling to all of
Yes.
us. It was
Yes.
so,
Yes.
it was
Yeah.
so out of the
Yes.
norm and out of the
Yes.
ordinary, and
Yes.
it shook everybody. But
Yes.
now I can
Yes.
tell you, even during focus groups, our children are telling us that, oh yes, miss, me every we think about me want to kill myself, and I go and kill myself, and
Mm-hmm.
it is with
Mm-hmm.
such ease
Yes. Yes.
that they
Yes.
consider doing it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is need for significant support for our young people. So thankfully,
Definitely.
thankfully, the Ministry of Education or Ministry of Health, there are a
Mm-hmm.
number of programs that are
Yes,
now
initiatives.
underway to be
Definitely.
able to increase awareness about mental health and
Right. And
remove the
provide.
stigma.
Yeah. And the provision of
Yes,
that helps with the helplines, and
precisely.
the
There's
training of the
rheumata.
guidance. Yes,
Yes,
yes, yes.
yes, yes, yes.
So
And so we are in a
seem as if we have lost Mrs. Atkins again, and we are getting to the nice part, we don't want to talk to her. But my listeners, we are speaking with our research analyst from National Council on Drug Abuse. Probably we need to try her other number because we keep getting cut off. But we are speaking about a serious issue, the issue of substance use, and especially in our young people, and why we want to talk about it more is because we recognize that they are enduring stressors, and these stressors can impact on how they cope with situations,
hello.
and coping. We're right here with you, Mrs. Atkins, and coping in
Okay.
negative ways, and we want to look at how it is that we can focus them to cope in positive ways, and looking at the strategies that they can use, and empower them, to be mentally healthy individuals, as we try to educate them about being aware of what substances, the negative impact of substances on their lives. So we're back with Mrs. Atkinson.
Yes,
Oh,
I'm back.
yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
yes, yes.
So I wanted it. I mean, sometimes when we speak about the realities, it sounds like a terrible doom and gloom situation,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and we don't want to stay there. In other
No,
words, we want to move the conversation and
definitely.
move the efforts to what are we doing about it. So we
Yes,
know this is a
yes,
situation. We know it has gotten
yes,
worse.
yes,
It is getting worse. But how
yes.
are we going to
Mm-hmm,
address it?
mm-hmm.
And this requires not just the people who work at the National Council on Drug
Definitely
Abuse or the
not.
people who work in mental health.
Mm-mm.
That's what I think
Mm-hmm.
we fail to understand, that
Right, right.
everybody has a role to play
Exactly.
in the prevention of drug use
Exactly.
and drug misuse,
Yes.
not only
Yes.
among young people, but also among adults.
Yes.
But what we want to say to parents in particular, this is
Mm-hmm.
very important for parents to understand and listen.
Mm-hmm.
You have to develop a close and trusting relationship
Relationship with your
with
child.
your child from an
Yes.
early stage. You
Yes.
can't wait until heart is gone
Mm-hmm.
through the gate already,
Mm-hmm.
and that
Mm-hmm.
is when you want to haul them up and rough them up
Mm-hmm.
and tough them up and beat them
Mm-hmm.
up and say, you know you mustn't do this and you must.
Mm-hmm.
No, from when they are young,
Yes.
you are remaining close to them.
Yes.
You leave the lines open for them to come and
Mm-hmm.
tell you what they
Mm-hmm.
think, what they see,
Mm-hmm.
what their friends are telling them.
Yes.
You know where they are. You are participating. You're eating lunch with them. You're eating dinner. You're taking them places. I'm not saying you must spend a whole heap of money. I'm saying time is very important because all of the studies across the
Mm-hmm.
world,
Mm-hmm.
especially, and I'm going to speak about studies here in Jamaica too, the
Yes.
children
Yes.
whose parents spend quality time with them
Mm-hmm.
and supervise them and have
Mm-hmm.
rules about,
Mm-hmm.
how they operate and how they
Yes.
move and
Yes.
so on. Those children have a significantly lower level of substance use
Mm-hmm.
compared to those children whose
Mm-hmm.
parents are not
Involved.
participating in their
Mm-hmm.
lives.
Okay. I want to bear in mind or bring persons to the remembrance that there are what we call windows of opportunities to intervene. And so
Yes,
when I speak to the young persons, I know the 0 to 5, and I recognize that the government, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the Parenting Association, are
yes,
looking at how it is that we can go out into communities. And
yes,
I remember reading an article, it was an international article, that actually spoke to parenting and having
yes,
those community initiatives where the visiting of the mothers when they were
yes,
when the mother just have baby, and to go
yes.
into the home and visit
Yes,
and
do you know that
having
we pioneered that here in Jamaica?
interesting, yes,
Yes,
interesting,
and it impacted several countries
interesting,
internationally in terms of
interesting.
adopting that model. We
Okay,
pioneered
probably
that
you
in
should tell us
Jamaica.
about it.
Well, because it was a study I think that started from in the 70s, if I am correct,
Interesting.
where mothers, what they did was to test whether, mothers who came from a certain socioeconomic background, so
Yes.
mothers who were struggling in terms of being able to make ends meet and so
Okay.
on,
Okay.
they had persons go and visit the mothers, help them
Yes.
to stimulate the children,
Yes.
learn how to, play with your baby, talk to your
Yes.
baby, sing to your
Yes.
baby.
Whoa.
Those and they followed those children for many, many years to
Yes.
see the outcomes and
Right.
how it impacted. Parenting is a
Yes.
very, very important role. And some of
Right.
the things too,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we think, okay, we need outside help.
I'm telling you.
But there are things we can do, and sometimes
Yes.
it's just that we don't know. So there are
Yes.
practical tips that we give to
Yes.
parents to say things
Yes.
like, take advantage of a teachable moment. So if you're watching
Yes.
TV together,
Yes.
or if you see something on the road or something
Mm-hmm.
to do with drug
Mm-hmm.
use, that is
Mm-hmm.
something that you can ask your child. So what do you
Yes.
think about this?
Yes.
And
Yes.
listen to what your child thinks
Yes.
and
Yes.
use that moment to be able to
Yes.
give them a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
guidance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Guidance, the way we give guidance though, is very
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we say, you better not do this, because if you do this, I'm going to do this to you, I'm going to do
Mm-hmm.
that. And you try to
Mm-hmm.
um, scare the child
Yes, yes. Scare
into
tactics. Yes.
obedience, right?
Yes.
But that's not what we're talking about.
Yes.
We're talking
Yes.
about having conversations that help them to understand what you're saying and why you're
Mm-hmm.
saying it.
Yes.
Another
Yes.
thing
Yes.
is you have to set an example yourself. So if
Mm-hmm.
every day the child gets up and they
Mm-hmm.
see you smoking from morning till night,
Mm-hmm.
or they hear you saying if you stress out, Lord, I need a drink, Lord, I need
The
a smoke,
cigarette. Yes. Yes.
then they are going to adapt and adopt
Mm-hmm.
those
Mm-hmm.
kind of behaviors
Mm-hmm.
in their own
Yes.
lives.
Yes.
So
Yes.
when you turn around and see them start to do it, you can't cuss them because that's
Mm-hmm.
the example that you have set,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
things like also establishing rules and
Mm-hmm.
agreements about things
Yes.
that are acceptable and things
Mm-hmm.
that are not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be
Mm-hmm.
consistent with rules too.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Have open discussions, have honest
Mm-hmm.
discussions. Now, one of the things we also try to tell parents is if you used to use when you were young, don't glorify it and make it sound like it was such a wonderful thing. Like there are
Experience.
parents
Yes.
or people who will say, boy,
Yes.
when
Yes.
I was young, boy, me used to
Yes.
drink whole heap and
Yes.
me used to
Yes.
drunk and make it sound
Yes.
like it was something that's wonderful. Because
Yes.
what you're
Yes.
going to be doing is making it an attractive practice for your child to replicate, for your child to do it as well, you know? And so you ask your children questions and listen to their answers. Sometimes we don't ask, we just tell, you know? So there are a number of things that parents can do, and the more you practice it, it might not come natural. Just like how we don't want to talk about sex, we don't want to talk about it because it feels uncomfortable. But the more you do it, is the easier it will become. And so we encourage parents to stay close to your children, especially now. Now you see what happened a few weeks ago in St. Anne with those children, right? That is an indication of a different level that we have reached, you know, where somebody can go and knowingly sell a substance to children. That is, it's. I mean, you saw what happened. We all know what happened. The children were hospitalized. A child could have died out of that experience, you know.
And Mrs. Atkinson, I know that we're talking about I'm just praying that all children have recovered and
I'm
recovered
sorry, I'm not
some.
hearing very
I
clearly.
say I'm praying that all children that they have recovered and they have
Yes,
recovered sufficiently, because we can never know if there's going to be an impact in the next 5 or in the next 10 years
yes.
because of that substance intake.
Yes, thankfully they all recovered. Thankfully
Yes,
the school and everybody, all
yes,
hands were on board, and
right,
you know the reactions were quick and they were
yes,
swift and they were appropriate.
yes.
But the point I wanted to make is that
Mm-hmm.
parents now need to take
On
that
vigilant.
incident and
Mm-hmm.
use it as a warning,
Mm-hmm.
and as an
Mm-hmm.
example
Mm-hmm.
of how much more we need to be guiding our
Yes,
children,
yes, yes,
guiding them about who they buy things from, even
yes,
their friends. We have
yes.
heard instances where friends have given their adolescent or teenage friends Molly in their drink and they don't know anything
Mm.
about it, and it
Mm-hmm.
impacts them in a
Bad
terrible way.
way. Right,
You
right,
know,
right,
where
right.
people have been unknowingly drugged, and then they
Mm-hmm.
look and they see video and picture themselves of
Wow.
what they were doing, and you know,
Wow.
so
Yes.
there are some serious implications and some serious actions that parents need to take.
Mm-hmm.
Teachers
Mm-hmm.
need to be aware,
Yes,
medical
yes,
professionals need to be aware,
yes,
so
yes,
that we
yes,
know if a child
yes.
presents in school and something is going off and
Mm-hmm.
they don't seem to be doing okay, or
Mm-hmm.
you can
Mm-hmm.
tell they're under the influence.
Yes,
There are
yes.
actions that also teachers can take. Brief
Mm-hmm.
interventions, they are called, to have a
Mm-hmm.
conversation with a child. Take a child through a conversation that helps them to acknowledge that they're using, helps them to
Mm.
recognize that it's not appropriate for them, and if it is necessary, you refer them to treatment if they need it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a
Mm-hmm.
whole lot,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Cosman, as you well know. There is a lot,
Yes, I know,
there
I
is a lot.
know, I know. But and I'm like in that brief intervention, I call it ARR for people to remember. You acknowledge, you recognize that something is wrong, and there's a referral process. So the child acknowledge, recognize something is wrong, and then there's a referral process. So that's a brief intervention. But I wanted to look at, because sometimes parents might say, so doc, oh, say something not right. So, and there are newer drugs that are coming in, and we are saying that, sometimes you know how your child should behave, and if you're seeing anything out of the norm, and we know about the marijuana, the eye them look red, them start look wild, them start the grades start falling, and all sort of things start happening. What should we look for with the Molly?
With Molly,
Yes.
okay, so all right, so Molly is a different whole different category. Now,
Yes.
all right, generally, where you see significant changes in your child, things like
Yes.
changes in their sleep patterns, if they're excessively sweating, if they're excessively nauseous and sick, or if there's a lot of teeth clenching, because um, MDMA can cause muscle spasms and muscle contraction. So there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of grinding of the teeth and
Mm-hmm.
those kind
Mm-hmm.
of things that are,
Mm-hmm.
if that your child wasn't doing
Mm-hmm.
that before, or your
Mm-hmm.
adolescent or young adult. I
Mm-hmm.
remember recently I was at an event, and this is an aside. I was at an event,
Mm-hmm.
and It was an outdoor event. It was a
Mm-hmm.
cool evening, and a gentleman came and he sat down beside me, and he was sweating profusely. When I say profusely, the man was drenched in sweat.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
sat down there and I said to myself, no, this is not normal because everybody else is cool. The man
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't dancing up. It
Yes,
wasn't,
yes.
but and it seemed to
Mm-hmm.
me like it was one of those reactions. I mean, it must have been a reaction to something. I'm not assuming it was
Right.
Molly, but
Yes, yes, yes,
I
yes.
wondered that evening. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't say anything, didn't do
Mm-hmm.
anything because I'm not, an adult male and
Mm-hmm.
so on. I didn't do any intervention. But when you see things like that, um, when
Mm-hmm.
you see that their emotions are erratic. So one minute they're very, very, very depressed and they may lock themselves away.
Mm-hmm.
They may
Yes.
not be eating, and then the
Yes.
next minute they're laughing, they're crying. It can cause emotions to go,
Mm-hmm.
haywire. In
Yes.
fact, we got a
Yes.
call from a concerned uncle sometime earlier this year about his niece whose friends and herself they were all using Molly, and he said finally she confessed that that is what was wrong with her because they were wondering why she locked up in her room so much and she
Mm-hmm.
just so depressed and they
Mm-hmm.
said like literally 1 week straight she was in her room and she just was not interacting with
Mm-hmm.
anybody,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually she came out of the depressive state and she was able to tell them that this is the
Wow.
drug that she was using, and
Wow.
it's somebody was supplying it to herself and her
Oh,
friends and all of
wow.
them were using it. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say look out for those very,
Mm-hmm.
very
Mm-hmm.
different kinds of
Mm-hmm.
behaviors that are
Mm-hmm.
not typical among your child. And then of course
Mm-hmm.
the
Okay.
kind of company that they keep.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I mean, when they say, show me your friend, the company,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
I tell
Tell
you
you who
who you
you
are,
are,
or birds of a
definitely.
feather flock together, that kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing,
Mm-hmm.
it still remains true
Yes.
today.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so if you have a concern about the kind of company that your young person is keeping, and you know that it is a set of peers who are likely to influence them negatively.
Mm-hmm.
And usually, you see, bad influence is not only about drug use, it's for other high risk taking behaviors. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
generally, the young people who are using substances are also probably doing some other things that are not
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes you can just if the people who they are, as we say in Jamaica, parring with, right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
people who they are keeping company with.
Yes.
If that's not a good group, you can
Mm-hmm.
have an intervention with your child, talk to them about it, try to get them to
Mm-hmm.
see that this is a significant risk that they're
Yes.
taking because the
Yes.
likelihood is that they're going to be influenced by their friends,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have this comment. I'm going to read it. It's a bit long, but it's a very interesting comment from Ryan Jackson. He said, "Good evening, family. The use of vape and other drugs have gone up and has become the norm for children in the North. COVID has also exacerbated the problem, and the children are leaning to these illicit drugs to cope. But the data is not showing that it is helping. For example, in New York, the state exam scores in 2022, 2023 has been the worst since the 1970s crack epidemic. And also, there's a strong correlation between the decline in scores and the increase in drug use in the same age group that took the state exam. This doesn't necessarily mean causation. However, in light of this, how can we as adults that know better make vaping, popping Mali, sipping rose, and cavassier all day ugly and unattractive for our youths? So that's a question posed by Ryan, and I think you have made some good points that I think, and I'm liking the idea of the youth ambassador and the youth advisory council, because as you say, out of the bellies of the youths will come forth the ideas that will be able
Absolutely.
to help us, because we can come up with all sorts of things, and them say,
Yeah,
sure,
absolutely.
them they're old time things.
Yes, and what we also do is peer education. So we build the
Mm.
capacity of peer educators and
Mm-hmm.
peer leaders
Mm-hmm.
to be able to reach their own. So as they say, if I say to a young person, vape is not good for you, you shouldn't be doing
Mm-hmm.
it because it can harm you, it can
Mm-hmm.
impact your mental
Mm-hmm.
health. if I say it and somebody else says it, somebody who is closer to their age, they are
Mm-hmm.
likely to listen more to the person closer to them than they
Yes.
are to me,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
And the
Yes.
way that they say it and the way that, and one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that we've also come to realize as a
Mm-hmm.
council,
Mm-hmm.
and we're glad that the school community is also realizing it. The peer counselors don't always have to be the best students in the school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You
Yes.
understand what I'm
Yes.
saying to you?
Yes. Yes.
The peer counselors
Yes.
can be those young people who
Mm-hmm.
them give a little trouble sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But they are influencers. They
Mm-hmm.
are leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes those are the best people you use
Mm-hmm.
to try and get them on board with
Right.
the message you're trying to give.
Right. Right.
And once they buy into it, everybody
Yes.
follows suit.
Yes. Yes.
You know what
Yes.
I mean? So
Yes.
we also incorporate. So it's not always the greatest, wonderful A students,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and we got that advice from students themselves. Them to miss,
Mm-hmm.
nobody not listening to the nerds. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to,
To label them, yes,
make
but
it sound like
yes, yes,
students who
yes,
do well should not be listening
yes,
to. That's
yes.
just not what I'm
No,
saying.
no.
But we have
Yes,
to listen to our young people and the
yes,
advice they give and
yes,
try and tailor the
yes,
interventions accordingly.
yes, yes. I wanted
Yes.
to one of the things, and I was very grateful that I was a part of a session that spoke about the early warning system. And probably you can just tell us a little bit about that, okay, because we have a few minutes left to
Okay.
go. But I believe that it is very important for
Yes,
us
it
to
is.
know about it. Yes.
All right. Okay. So let me just backtrack a little. There
Yes.
are across the world,
Mm-hmm.
there is a considerable increase in terms of countries that are reporting what are called new psychoactive substances, otherwise
Mm-hmm.
called NPS, new
Mm-hmm.
psychoactive substances. Now, these are a category of drugs
Mm-hmm.
that are increasing in the markets in Europe,
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
North America,
Mm-hmm.
as well as in Latin America, and now
Yeah.
in Caribbean
And
countries.
I want to just pause there a little to tell when you hear about psychoactive people, talk about it affecting the brain, and people go and hear things and see things and do things, all sort of crazy things that it's not a part of them. So that's why it's so important to know about.
Right,
Yes,
right. So it is a threat to our public health and a threat to public security.
definitely.
Because here's the thing:
Yes,
these substances are
yes,
made in labs, right? So there are a
yes,
range of chemicals that people
yes.
put all
Hmm.
kind of different chemical
Wow.
concoctions together,
Mm-hmm.
and it impacts people in
Mm-hmm.
ways and worse
Yes,
that traditional drugs will impact them. So
yes,
it can make people very sick. Now, over
yes.
1,100 new substances
Wow.
have been reported to authorities in the past 10 years through the UNODC, that's the United
Mm-hmm.
Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. So these things are
Mm-hmm.
coming up, they're cropping up,
Mm-hmm.
they are part of our new
Yes.
reality. And there is need
Yes.
for us to
Mm-hmm.
develop what is called early warning systems to be
Mm-hmm.
able to address these new things. Now, this is
Yes.
new, brand
Yes.
new things.
Yes. Yes.
And new things
Wow.
that are not necessarily under our laws. So, what is
Yes.
an early warning system?
Mm-hmm.
An early warning system is really a network of people and
Mm-hmm.
experts and
Mm-hmm.
individuals and different disciplines,
Mm-hmm.
multidisciplinary network
Mm-hmm.
of key stakeholders that
Mm-hmm.
are able to generate and
Right.
share information about what is happening. So these are
Mm-hmm.
stakeholders that come from law enforcement. So you have
Mm-hmm.
narcotics, you have customs, you have forensics, because when these drugs are seen, like suppose if they're coming through the ports, they're coming
Mm-hmm.
through customs, they're coming,
Right.
there's a seizure and we find these new pills or so. We don't know what they are
Mm-hmm.
until they are chemically analyzed, right?
Right.
So they have
Right.
to go through a process of finding out what exactly is the component in this drug. So
Mm-hmm.
forensics is important.
Yes.
Health professionals are important. Somebody could turn up
Yes.
at an
Right.
emergency center, an
Right.
emergency
Right.
unit
Yes.
with they could be unconscious, they could
Mm-hmm.
be, and somebody could say, well, I took a pill, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't know what the
What
pill
pill
is that
is?
they took,
Mm-hmm.
and they may have a sample of the pill or they
Mm-hmm.
may not. You
Mm-hmm.
know, in
Mm-hmm.
some cases in the US, people are turning up dead, and
Mm-hmm.
that's just the truth.
Yes,
In
yes.
the last year, over 80,000 people died because of overdoses of
Wow.
drugs. of
Oh.
opioid overdose. We
Mm-hmm.
can't handle that because
Then it
health
not.
system is not equipped to handle that. So
Mhm.
this early warning system is a
Yes.
mechanism to be able to proactively deal with those things. We
Yes.
wait until 70 children have to go to a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
It
Yes.
is
Yes.
something that we are urgently developing. Thankfully,
Yes. Yes.
our decision makers, the Minister of Health, was at the workshop.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
Minister of State, National
Yes.
Security, Minister of
Yes.
Justice was
Yes.
represented, and
Yes.
everyone recognizes the importance
Importance.
of the
Yes.
development of
Mm-hmm.
this network. And
Mm-hmm.
we thankfully have gotten capacity building from the Organization of American States.
Mm-hmm.
We're also
Mm-hmm.
going to be getting more capacity building so that we'll understand how it is the network is supposed to communicate. How are
Mm-hmm.
we going to be able to do this thing? It's supposed to be a rapid response. So it's not that you
Yes.
wait until a survey is
Mm-hmm.
conducted
Mm-hmm.
3 years down the
Mm-hmm.
line and
Mm-hmm.
you hear that Mali is in the
Yes.
population.
Yes.
It's when an event happens,
Mm-hmm.
you activate the network. There's
Mm-hmm.
a process that they go through, and then we determine how much of a threat it is. Is it that only St. Anne people need to hear about this,
Mm-hmm.
or is it that the entire Jamaica
Mm-hmm.
needs to hear, or is it
Mm-hmm.
only the health professionals in Montego Bay need to
Mm-hmm.
hear, or the whole of the Western region needs to
Mm-hmm.
hear? So
Mm-hmm.
that is the intent of the system, and
Yes.
we intend
Yes.
to
Yes.
launch it formally
Yes.
in
Yes.
January of next
Yes.
year.
Well, it is such a oh boy, it is such it's not something that we really expect, but we need it because we would want our population really to be drug free, as we say, drug free lifestyle trending. But
Yes,
of all the challenges that we are meeting, and we are seeing repercussions of this excessive use of substances. So the crime and
absolutely.
violence, we now have um state of emergency in
Yes,
St.
and the
James.
kinds of crime.
Oh
That's
my
that's another
gosh.
thing we need to look at.
Yes,
The
yes,
changing patterns of crime. Now
yes. Oh my
we don't
gosh.
know for sure
Mm-hmm.
the kind of substances, or
Mm-hmm.
but we
Mm-hmm.
know from prison surveys that we have conducted that
Yes.
there is a direct relationship between drugs and crime in
Yes.
terms of
Yes.
crimes
Mm-hmm.
crimes that people commit
And the
under the
heinous.
influence,
Yes.
or crimes that people commit to be able to get a drug, or crimes that they
Mm-hmm.
commit that are related to the whole broader
Yes. Okay.
the drug and drugs for gun trade and the
No,
organized
trafficking.
crime
Yes. Yes.
component.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it is in our best interest to really
Right.
pay keen attention
Yes.
to the drug problem.
Yes. Mrs. Atkinson, it has been, you can't believe it, but the time is far spent. We have got to end, but it is such a wonderful conversation. And we had to have it. And we want to really thank you for being part of Destigmatize. We really do appreciate it for raising our
Thank you
awareness. And
very
I
much
do
for
that our
having.
listeners, we hope to be able to do more. We will be able to partner more, and the collaborations will happen more across the country, across this nation, across the Caribbean, across the world, in getting our young people to be more or us as a community to really empower young people to make good choices, and
Yes,
even in the midst of stressors, that we will have the resources to be able to empower them to be resilient in these times, so that we
yes,
can really have a Jamaica that we want to live in, and a community that will raise good children for making a future of a positive future for our nation. So we really want to thank you and the work that you are doing at the National Council on Drug Abuse, and we look forward to participating in the other activities that are to come in your drug
drug
awareness
awareness month.
month.
Yes,
Yes,
thank you so much, Dr. Crosman.
yes.
Okay,
We thank you so much. Thank you very much, listeners. We are out of here now because we are right on the clock. So we want to thank you for being a part of Destigmatize. We look forward to seeing you next week Thursday, our guest, Mrs. Uke Anderson Atkinson. I don't know what's wrong with me today. From the National Council on Drug Abuse. As always, there but for the grace of God go I, and there's no good health without good mental health. And you know, I'm gonna close with my favorite Rondell Positive Mirror. We can make a change. Yes, it takes you and me. Till we meet next week. Answers in the mirror. A mirror.